The shocking truth about my adoption revealed at dinner. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. You were never supposed to find out you're adopted. Carol said it so calmly that for a second I thought I'd misheard. The fork slipped from my hand and clanged against my plate, gravy splattering my shirt. Noah froze across from me, his eyes dropping instantly to his lap like he could hide inside his phone. Mark just kept cutting his steak, jaw tight, the knife sawing a little too hard. I'm Jamie, 28, the family peacemaker by default. I'm the one who remembers birthdays, smooths over fights in the group chat, and sits between my parents at Christmas so they won't bicker about politics. My entire personality is basically emotional duct tape. And, until about 30 seconds ago, I thought we all shared the same blood. Excuse me, I asked, my voice weirdly polite. What did you say? Carol's smile trembled at the edges. Jamie, honey, please don't be dramatic. We were going to tell you, but the timing. I repeated. I'm almost 30. Mark finally looked up. His face was expressionless, that carefully neutral mask he wears at work events. Let your mother explain, he said. It sounded like a warning, not a request. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the clink of cutlery from other tables. Because this wasn't just any dinner. Carol had insisted on a proper family evening at her favorite Italian restaurant. White tablecloths and candles, and a waiter who called her Mrs. Harlow with practiced warmth. She'd even told me to wear something presentable because she had important news. I thought she was going to announce she was sick, or that they were moving, or maybe, for once in their lives, that they were proud of me. Instead, she'd just detonated the center of my identity between the breadbasket and the wine list. I stared at the three people I'd called my family my entire life, and suddenly every tiny moment of not quite belonging snapped into terrifying focus. I had no idea the real explosion hadn't even started yet. Looking back, the clues were everywhere, but I'd filed them under family weirdness. I was shorter than everyone else, darker hair, darker eyes. Carol would joke, we must have picked up the wrong baby at the hospital, then laugh a little too loudly, like she needed everyone to find it funny. When I was 10, I had an asthma attack at school. The nurse asked about family history, and Carol hesitated just a second too long before saying, No, nothing like that. Later, in the car, she snapped, Don't tell people our business, Jamie. Doctors love drama. Noah never got those lectures. He looks like a copy-paste of Mark. Same nose, same easy smile, same way of taking up space without apologizing for it. Growing up, relatives would pat his shoulder and say, Oh, you're such a Caldwell. Then glance at me and add, And you've got a great sense of humor. 2 weeks before that dinner, we were filling out insurance forms at the kitchen table. There was a section about hereditary conditions. I asked, Do we have any cancers that run in the family? Mark shifted in his chair, but Carol just said, You're healthy. Check no, and stop borrowing trouble. Noah had snorted. You really don't look like any of us, you know that? He joked. Maybe you're secretly royalty. Yeah, Carol said quickly, a strange tightness in her voice. If only. It stung more than it should have, but I laughed it off. That's what I do, smooth, soften, absorb. I told myself 1,000 stories, recessive genes, random chance, my brain inventing drama because my life was too normal. Sitting at that restaurant table, those memories lined up like little warning signs I'd ignored. And then Carol took a breath and said something that made my stomach turn to ice. Your brother got his DNA results back, Carol said, reaching for her wine with shaking fingers. It brought up some things we didn't anticipate. Noah's head shot up. Mom, he hissed, I told you I'd handle it. DNA results? I repeated. Since when are we doing ancestry kits? Everyone at work is doing them, Noah said, shrugging. It was a joke. I wanted to see if we were, like, 2% Viking or whatever. He wouldn't meet my eyes. A slow, crawling dread started in my chest. I'd almost bought one of those kits last year when they were on sale. Carol had shut it down fast. You don't need strangers keeping your genetic data, she'd said. It's all a scam, Jamie. Don't waste your money. Anyway, she continued now, pushing her salad around her plate. Noah's results came in. They gave him a list of close relatives who'd also tested. And, well, one of them should have been you. I blinked. What? The test? Noah cut in, voice low. flagged me as having one full sibling. Only one. Mom and Dad. And me. That's it. The words settled over the table like thick smoke. I felt myself drifting back to last summer. Our neighbor, Mrs. Klein, leaning over the fence, squinting at me. "Your Carol's?" she'd asked, frowning. Funny. I always thought. Then she'd stopped herself, cheeks flushing, and changed the subject. There was my birth certificate, too, the one I'd needed for a passport. The hospital name didn't match the story Mark always told about rushing Carol to St. Mary's in a snowstorm. I'd noticed it, asked once, and he'd brushed it off as paperwork mistakes. I'd been so eager not to rock the boat that I'd let the wave roll right over my head. "So the test says we're not siblings?" I asked, my voice sounding far away even to me. Noah swallowed hard. "It says we're something else," he said, and my skin prickled. Because whatever that something else was, my parents clearly knew more than they were admitting. "Just say it." I snapped, louder than I meant to. A couple at the next table glanced over. "Stop talking around it. What are you so afraid of?" Carol flinched like I'd slapped her. "Lower your voice," she whispered. "This is a nice place." "Jamie," Mark said, folding his napkin with surgical precision. "We were going to tell you when the time was right." "The time?" My laugh came out jagged. "When exactly is the right time to mention, hey, by the way, you're adopted?" A vein throbbed in his temple. "We didn't want you to feel different," he said. "We raised you. We fed you. We loved you. That's what matters." "That's not all that matters," I shot back. "My medical history matters. My identity matters. You let me grow up feeling crazy for noticing I didn't fit." Noah finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I only found out last week," he said. "From the test. I confronted them, and they promised they'd tell you tonight." "I told your father to call a lawyer first," Carol muttered, like she hadn't meant to say it aloud. A cold, metallic taste flooded my mouth. "A lawyer?" I repeated. "Why would you need a lawyer if this is just a cute little secret about my origin story?" Mark's chair scraped as he leaned closer. "Because these things get complicated," he said. "There were circumstances. People involved who might not want the past reopened." I stared at him, at the man whose last name I carried, whose approval I'd chased my entire life like a dog after a car. His eyes slid away. I shoved my chair back so fast it nearly tipped. The restaurant went quiet in that curious, hungry way strangers get when they smell drama. "If you don't tell me everything," I said, my voice shaking, "I will find out on my own." "Jamie, please sit," Carol begged, tears pooling in her eyes. "You don't understand what you're risking." I dropped my napkin on the table like a white flag I refused to hold anymore. And then Mark said one sentence that made me feel physically sick. "If you open this up," he murmured, "you could destroy more than one family." For a second, I thought he meant my biological family, the faceless shadows who'd given me up. Then I saw the way Carol's hand shot out, gripping his wrist hard, her nails digging into his skin, and a different possibility slammed into me. "How many families are we talking about?" I asked slowly. No one answered. I walked out. Just walked out of the restaurant, past the curious stares and the waiter asking, "Is everything okay, ma'am?" in a voice that already knew it wasn't. The February air hit my face like a slap. My breath fogged in front of me as I fumbled for my car keys with shaking hands. My phone buzzed nonstop. Noah calling, then Carol, then Noah again. I let it ring. I drove around aimlessly for an hour, crying so hard I had to pull over twice. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of a closed supermarket, staring at the flickering neon sign and wondering if any of my memories were real. Had Carol ever looked at me without resentment hiding under her smile? Had Mark ever seen me as more than a mistake he was obligated to fix? Had Noah ever truly seen me as his sibling, or just as the person he was told I was? By the time I dragged myself back to my tiny apartment, my eyes were swollen and my throat hurt. I ignored the 15 missed calls and the barrage of texts. "We love you. We can explain. Please don't do anything stupid." I was halfway through typing and deleting a dozen furious replies when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a different name. Aunt Rosa. We weren't especially close. She lived across town and mostly saw us on holidays. But she'd always been kind in a quiet, almost guilty way, slipping me extra dessert when Carol wasn't looking. The message preview on my screen made my hands go numb before I even opened it fully. Her text read, "I told them this would happen. Call me. Please. I stared at it for a full minute before hitting call. She picked up on the first ring. Jamie. Her voice was breathless, like she'd been pacing. Are you safe? Are you alone? Yes, I said slowly. I'm home. Aunt Rosa, how long have you known? There was a rustle, like she was covering the phone with her hand, then a sigh. Since the beginning, she said. Since the night they brought you home. My heart thudded painfully. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did everyone act like I was crazy for feeling different? It wasn't my secret to tell, she said. I argued. I begged them to be honest when you were old enough to understand. Your mother, she broke off. Carol dug her heels in. And Mark was terrified. Terrified of what? Another pause. Of losing everything, she said softly. His reputation, his career, his marriage. You. She took a breath. Jamie, listen to me carefully. If you go digging, you need to be prepared for whatever you find. This isn't a simple adoption story. A bitter laugh escaped me. What does that even mean? Black market baby? Secret cult? Did you all buy me on Craigslist? Don't joke, she snapped, sharper than I'd ever heard her. Then, more gently, there are irregularities. I saw documents once that didn't match up. Names crossed out. Dates changed. And I know for a fact you were not born at St. Mary's like they always say. My stomach flipped. How do you know that? Because I was there when Carol got the call, she said. She was at home with me that night. The room tilted slightly. Hospital stories. Snowstorm. Mark rushing her in. Had all of that been fiction? My life suddenly felt like a badly written script. Rosa, I whispered. Do you know who my biological parents are? Her answer was so quiet I almost missed it. I know more than I should, she said. But before I say anything, you need to see something for yourself. And that's when she told me where to start looking if I really wanted the truth. The next morning, I called in sick to work and took the train downtown. My hands wouldn't stop trembling as I climbed the steps to the Vital Records office, clutching the information Rosa had given me. The name of a different hospital, across the city, and a date that was 2 days earlier than the one on my birth certificate. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A bored clerk slid a form toward me. Fill this out, she said. Reason for request? Verification of personal records, I muttered, ticking the box. I listed both hospitals, the one on my certificate and the one Rosa had mentioned, along with my supposed birth date. The clerk raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. She disappeared into a back room, leaving me alone with the hum of printers and the drum of my heartbeat. 15 minutes later, she returned with 2 thin folders. We have a record of a live birth at County General on this date, she said, tapping one folder. For an unnamed female infant, last name left blank. Mother listed as private patient. No father on record. There's also an amendment filed 2 days later. And then, oddly, a separate certificate from St. Mary's with your current details. She frowned. That's unusual. My mouth went dry. Can I see the original? She hesitated. Technically, you're entitled to your own records. After a moment, she slid the first folder across the counter. You didn't get this from me. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly faded. But my birthday, the day I'd celebrated my whole life, was written there, just 2 days earlier. Under Mother, there was only a single initial and a last name I didn't recognize. Under Father, blank. The amendment stapled to the back listed adoptive parents, Mark and Carol Harlow. In tiny print at the bottom, closed adoption. Records sealed by court order. Court order? I asked, my voice barely functioning. The clerk shrugged. Sometimes that happens with sensitive cases. High-profile families. Complicated situations. High-profile. Mark's face flashed in my mind. His polished LinkedIn, his speeches at charity events, his obsession with how our family looked in Christmas photos. I copied every detail I could, then took photos on my phone, hands shaking. As I walked out onto the street, traffic roared around me, and the world looked exactly the same. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. My parents had lied under oath about something huge. That night, I spread the documents out on my kitchen table like crime scene evidence. I zoomed in on the photo of the original record, tracing the last name of my biological mother with my finger. Morales. I'd never heard Carol mention anyone with that name. But the word tugged at something distant, like a song I'd heard once in a crowded room. I opened my laptop and started searching. There were dozens of Moraleses in the city, but one result made my stomach lurch. An old local news article about a protest outside County General 28 years ago. The headline, Young Mother Claims Baby Taken Without Consent During Closed Adoption Arrangement. The photo was grainy, but I recognized the hospital entrance from my earlier visit. The woman holding a handwritten sign looked exhausted and furious. The sign read, "Where's my daughter?" Her last name was Morales. My heart pounded as I skimmed the article. It mentioned allegations of coercion, pressure from a social worker, and a well-connected couple who had followed all legal procedures. The couple's names were redacted in the scanned PDF, but there was a stray detail that made my blood run cold. The husband was described as a rising attorney with political ambitions. Mark had started his career as an attorney. I'd seen the framed newspaper clipping in his home office. Young lawyer wins landmark case for city council. Same year. Same smug smile. I scrolled further. At the bottom of the article, a quote from the young mother. They told me I was selfish, that my baby would have a better life with them. They said if I fought, they'd drag my name through the mud. A wave of nausea hit me. Had my whole life been somebody else's loss? I texted Rosa a screenshot. Do you know this woman? I typed. It took her a few minutes to answer. I know of her, she replied. Your parents will never forgive me if I tell you more. They lied to a judge, I wrote, fingers flying. I don't owe them blind loyalty. Another pause. Then, her first name is Elena, and she never stopped asking questions. What I didn't know was that Elena had already found a way to start asking questions about me. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the protest sign, the empty space where father should have been, the redacted names that didn't feel very anonymous anymore. By morning, I had a plan. Not a good one, maybe, but something to hold on to. Step 1, gather everything. I printed the articles, the hospital record, the amendment, my official birth certificate. I screenshotted texts from Rosa and saved them in a folder labeled Taxes 2020 because paranoia had finally kicked in. Step 2, talk to someone who wasn't emotionally entangled. I didn't have a fancy lawyer on speed dial, but I did have the number for a legal clinic I'd volunteered with once. I called, explained in shaky, vague terms that I had questions about sealed adoption records and possible coercion. Without names, I can only give general advice, the attorney on the phone said. But if records were sealed, there was usually a petition. You might be able to request access as an adult adoptee, especially if you suspect wrongdoing. Wrongdoing. The word sat heavy in my stomach. Step 3. Decide who to confront first. Part of me wanted to storm into my parents' house and slam the papers on the table, like in some courtroom drama. Another part pictured sitting across from a stranger in a coffee shop, a woman named Elena Morales, and watching her face when she looked at me. Either way, there was no going back. That afternoon, as I was organizing everything into a binder, because apparently trauma makes me weirdly administrative, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. Subject line, we need to talk about County General. The sender's name made my blood run cold. Elena M. I clicked it with shaking hands. Jamie, it began. You don't know me, but I believe I know who you are. Your parents will not tell you the truth. Please meet me before they convince you I'm crazy too. And then she mentioned a piece of information only someone present at my supposed birth could possibly know. The email described a birthmark. You have a small crescent-shaped birthmark on your left hip, Elena wrote. The nurse tried to joke that it looked like a tiny moon. I wanted to name you Luna, but they said that name was too ethnic and would make your life harder. I stood in my bathroom, hands shaking, and pulled down the waistband of my jeans. The birthmark I'd always thought was random pigmentation stared back at me from the mirror. I sank onto the edge of the tub, dizzy. This woman wasn't guessing. She wasn't a scammer. She knew my body. I forwarded the email to a new, hidden address and deleted it from my main inbox. Then I texted Noah, we need to talk. Just us. No mom, no dad. He replied almost immediately. I'm at the house. They're freaking out. You okay? Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th in an hour, I wrote. Come alone. When he arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept either. He ordered a latte with shaking hands and slid into the booth across from me. You look like hell, he said softly. Thanks, I answered. So do you. We sat in silence for a moment, the hiss of the espresso machine filling the space between us. Noah, I said finally, what did they tell you after I left last night? He swallowed. That you're adopted, obviously. That they did everything legally. that the birth mother was unstable and kept trying to cause trouble. Dad said she spread lies about them to the press. He hesitated. He made it sound like they saved you. I pushed the printed article across the table. This is what unstable looks like, I said. A 19-year-old holding a sign outside a hospital. Noah read in silence, his brow furrowing. They never mentioned a protest, he murmured. Of course they didn't, I said. Why ruin the hero narrative? His knee bounced under the table. Jamie, slow down. Even if they pushed her, it doesn't mean everything was illegal. You had a good life. We had a good life. Did we? I asked, my voice cracking. Or did we have a carefully curated story built on someone else's grief? He looked up, eyes glossy. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath. I'm going to meet her, I said. And then I'm going to decide if Mom and Dad deserve a chance to explain anything ever again. Noah's next sentence made it clear my parents were already moving to stop that from happening. They're talking about getting an injunction, he said, voice low. Dad was on the phone with some judge he knows. He kept saying, we have to protect our family from harassment. I stared at him. From my own mother? He winced. From the woman who gave birth to you, he corrected softly. Mom's words, not mine. Something inside me snapped into focus. Okay, I said. Then we moved faster. I replied to Elena's email from my secret account, agreeing to meet in a crowded cafe across town. I gave her a time 2 days out, partly so I could breathe, partly to see what my parents would do in the meantime. Then I called Rosa. They're trying to shut her down again, I said, using the same connections they used 28 years ago. I'm not surprised, she sighed. Mark has always believed rules are flexible when it comes to protecting his image. Will you come to a meeting? I blurted. If I confront them, I need someone there who remembers how this started. There was a long pause. If you set something up, she said finally, I'll be there. That night, my phone lit up with calls from Carol and Mark. I ignored them until a text came through from Carol that was so perfectly guilt-shaped it almost worked. You're breaking my heart, she wrote. We gave you everything. Why are you punishing us for one mistake? One mistake. An entire stolen origin story reduced to a bad haircut. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on. We're going to have a conversation soon. In person. With witnesses. Don't contact Elena. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. The next day, as I was leaving work, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The tinted window rolled down to reveal Mark, still in his suit, tie loosened. Get in, he said calmly. We need to talk before you make this worse for everyone. I didn't get in. I leaned down, resting my forearms on the open window, forcing my voice to stay steady. We can talk at my apartment, I said, with Rosa there. And Noah. And maybe someone who knows what the word coercion means in a legal context. Mark's jaw tightened. Bringing outsiders into this will hurt you more than it hurts us. That sounds like a threat, I replied. You're a lawyer. You should be more careful with your wording. His eyes flashed. You're my child, he said. I'm trying to keep you from making a mistake you can't undo. Am I? I asked quietly. Your child? For the first time, something like real fear flickered across his face. Get in the car, Jamie, he said again, lower now. Please. I straightened. Dinner, I said. Saturday. Your house. Everyone there. Or I start sharing documents with people who aren't afraid of you. We locked eyes for a long moment. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Fine, he said. Saturday. But you're going to regret turning this into a spectacle. As he drove away, my phone buzzed. An email from Elena. Are you sure you want me there? It might escalate things. Yes, I replied. They've been controlling the narrative for almost 30 years. It's time they heard someone else's version. Saturday came fast. I walked up the familiar stone path to my parents' front door feeling like I was approaching a crime scene. Rosa's car was already there. Noah stood on the porch, hands shoved into his pockets, looking pale. Inside, the dining room table was set like a holiday. China, candles, Carol's best centerpiece. She sat at the head of the table, lips pressed into a thin line. Mark stood behind her chair, one hand gripping the back, so hard his knuckles were white. And in the empty chair at the far end of the table sat a woman with my eyes. When she looked up at me and said my name, the room suddenly felt too small to hold all of us. Jamie, she whispered, standing so quickly her chair scraped. Up close, she looked older than in the article photo, of course, streaks of gray in her dark hair, lines around her mouth. But the expression was the same, raw, aching determination. Carol's voice sliced through the moment. "This is inappropriate," she said. "We agreed she would not address you directly." "We agreed on nothing," I said, never taking my eyes off Elena. "You agreed with yourselves for 28 years. It's my turn." Mark cleared his throat. "We are here to clear up some misunderstandings," he began in his courtroom voice. "Your adoption was legal. We followed every recommendation." Elena laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You followed every recommendation your friend the judge whispered over dinner," she snapped. "You told me if I didn't sign, you'd make sure I never saw my baby or my siblings again." Rosa flinched. "Is that true?" she asked, looking at Mark. His silence was answer enough. I opened my binder and laid the documents out like cards in a magic trick gone wrong. "Original birth record," I said. "Amendment. Sealed adoption. Protest article. Email describing a birthmark you never knew about." I slid the last page forward. "And a note from the legal clinic explaining what informed consent is supposed to look like." Noah shifted in his seat, face pale. "Dad," he whispered. Carol's composure finally cracked. "We gave you a life she couldn't," she shouted, pointing at Elena. "We paid for your school, your braces, everything. You think she could have done that? She lived in a one-bedroom with 3 kids and no husband." Elena's eyes flashed. "I was poor," she said. "I wasn't unfit. There's a difference you never wanted to understand." Mark slammed his palm on the table. "Enough," he barked. "Jamie, you can't undo what's been done. Digging through the past only hurts people." "People like who?" I asked. "The ones who lied, or the one who's been living inside a story she never agreed to?" Rosa cleared her throat. "There's something else they never told you," she said quietly, "about why Mark was so invested in keeping you close." The room went silent. And then Rosa revealed the final secret that turned my adoption into something far more twisted. "Jamie," Rosa said, hands twisting in her lap, "Mark isn't just your adoptive father." My ears rang. "I don't understand," I said, though a horrible, inevitable shape was already forming in my mind. Elena swallowed. "He was the one who got me the job at the firm," she said. "I was the receptionist. We made a mistake. I got pregnant. When I told him, he said his wife was trying for a baby, and it would kill her to know he'd fathered a child with someone else." Carol stared straight ahead, face drained of color. "He said the only way he could acknowledge the baby was if you grew up with him," Elena continued, voice shaking. "He said he'd make sure you had everything, but only if I signed the papers and disappeared." I looked at Mark, waiting for denial, anger, anything. He just looked tired. "It was complicated," he muttered. "Complicated," I repeated, my voice hollow. "So I'm your daughter and not your daughter, depending on what plays better at dinner parties." Noah looked like he might be sick. "Dad," he whispered, "she's my sister. Your daughter. How could you?" "I was trying to fix a mistake," Mark snapped. "I wanted you both. I couldn't lose Carol. The adoption made it clean." "Clean?" Elena echoed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You call this clean?" The room spun. Suddenly, my entire life rearranged itself. Every time Mark had been distant, every time Carol had looked at me like I was a stranger, every time I'd felt guilty for existing. I wasn't just a reminder of their generosity. I was a living monument to his betrayal. "I need air," I said, standing abruptly. "I'm going outside." On the porch, the cold hit me like a wave. I gripped the railing, trying to steady my breathing as muffled voices rose and fell inside. Part of me wanted to run, to change my number, to pretend I'd never opened this door. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "If you need a place to stay tonight, you're welcome at my apartment. Elena." I glanced back through the window at the house I'd grown up in, now just a museum of carefully curated lies. I realized that going back inside meant deciding, in real time, what kind of family I was willing to have from now on. I didn't sleep at Elena's that night. I went back in, sat through the screaming, the sobbing, the pleading. I listened to Carol alternate between furious victimhood and fragile apology. I watched Mark deflate as years of control slipped through his fingers. I saw Noah's world tilt on its axis, just like mine had. In the end, there were no neat resolutions. No group hug. No sudden swell of forgiveness. What we did have were boundaries. "I'm taking time," I told them. "From both of you." I looked at Elena. "I want to get to know you, but slowly. On my terms. Not as a weapon against them." She nodded, eyes shining. Whatever you need, she said. I'm glad you know you weren't abandoned because you were unlovable. I started therapy the next week. I told my story so many times it began to feel like a script, then slowly, like a history book, then finally, like something that had happened to me but didn't define every breath I took. I built a small circle of people who knew the whole messy truth and stayed anyway. Holidays are strange now. Some years I see Noah and Rosa. Some years I have coffee with Elena and listen to stories about the siblings who grew up without me. Some years I spend the day alone, cooking something simple and turning off my phone. Family, I've learned, isn't just the people who share your blood or your last name. It's the people who tell you the truth, even when it costs them. It's the people who apologize without expecting automatic forgiveness. It's the family you choose to keep, even after the paperwork says you belong to each other. If you're watching this because you feel like the odd one out, or because your family stories don't quite add up, here's my advice. Trust that tiny, persistent doubt and be brave enough to follow it. Because sometimes the only way to find yourself is to risk shattering the version of family you were handed.